we live, Wyn?
Yes, we are, Chair.
Fantastic, thank you. Bore da pawb, croeso. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Scrutiny Committee meeting of the Economy, Residents, Communities and Governance Scrutiny Committee meeting. Welcome to you all. First up this morning, folks, I'd like us just to take a minute to pause following the announcement of the death of His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh. So we'll take a minute silence before we formally begin today's meeting. Okay, thank you, everybody. Let's move on to item 1 on the agenda. It's to receive apologies for absence.
None received, Chair.
Thank you, Wyn. And we'll take item 2, which is declarations of interest, and item 3, which is declaration of party whips. We'll move on then to item 4, which is the revision of the statement of intent to improve the delivery of the Eco3 Flex scheme in Powys. We'll go over to Councillor Ian McIntosh, the portfolio holder, before we invite officers Nina Davis and Andy Thompson, who are joining us, to comment. Thank you. Ian, please.
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, and then it's just my only role at the moment then is to introduce Nina and Andy, and obviously as Nigel's alluded to, he's here as well if anybody needs to ask anything. So over to Nina, I think. Thank you.
Good morning, Boardar, everybody. This morning we're here to discuss the proposed revision of the Statement of Intent to improve delivery of Eco3 LA Flex in Powys. I'll just give you a very brief introduction and background to the report and set out the recommendation within that report. Eco3 is the UK-wide energy company obligation programme. It started in autumn 2018 and will run until March 2022. The programme delivers energy efficiency and heating measures to homes across the United Kingdom. Eco3 LA Flex allows a local authority to establish its own eligibility criteria. There's no obligation on a council to establish a scheme. However, doing so allows residents within that county to expand the range of households who can benefit from the help to improve energy efficiency and reduce fuel costs. Powys has opted to support the availability of the scheme in the county as it complements many other schemes, including Warm Homes, Arbed and Byth, Nest schemes, together with the Warm Homes Fund. The Eco LA Flex, compared to other schemes, includes within its eligibility some non-means tested benefits not included in other schemes. So this allows action to reduce fuel poverty, raise energy efficiency, and increase environmental sustainability to be enjoyed by more households and communities. In Powys, the scheme is delivered by Warm Wales, a not-for-profit community interest company specialising in tackling fuel poverty. Since the scheme was adopted in Powys in September 2020, Warm Wales has processed 37 applications, but has only generated the delivery of 2 installations of energy efficiency measures. This is far below expectations. Continued delivery at this rate is unlikely to adequately improve the energy efficiency and lower fuel costs of households at risk of fuel poverty. So the report in front of you today recommends a change in the Powys eligibility criteria, which has been informed by the latest guidance from the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy and Ofgem. So the idea is to embrace a wider client group and increase take-up of the scheme. Since Powys adopted the scheme in September 2020, the government issued updated Eco3 Eco3 guidance via Ofgem. This new guidance increases eligible income levels in line with higher child benefit thresholds. This means income threshold levels for Eco3 in Powys set out in the current statement of intent no longer reflect the latest national guidance. Eco3 in its current form is therefore unattractive to Powys households and unviable for Warm Wales to deliver. A review by Warm Wales, which you've been included within your report pack today, indicates that the low take-up of the scheme in Powys is the result of the restrictive eligibility criteria. The low income threshold, above which households are considered ineligible to help, is considered too low. I think it's important to note that there is no guaranteed share of Eco3 LA Flex funding for any one local authority area. It's first come, first served. Other Welsh councils, such as RCT, Neath Port Talbot, Ceredigion, Gwynedd, Pembrokeshire and Anglesey, all have more generous eligibility criteria when compared with Powys. So this has resulted in an increase in their take-up of Eco3. It's been higher than Powys is to date. And of course, this means that our Powys households may be losing out on really important investment. So the advice, following a thorough review by Warm Wales and Housing Services of both the latest UK and Ofgem guidance, together with the statements of intents that have been adopted by other Welsh authorities, it is proposed that the Powys Statement of Intent be amended. The recommended changes will allow for wider eligibility criteria, expanding from dealing for people with fuel poverty and helping those with lower incomes to embrace strategic targeting of the elderly and vulnerable. The main changes that have been recommended are a means-tested income cap of £34,500 for vulnerable applicants will be applied, which would make sure the scheme targets a wider range of low-income households. The current cap is dependent on household size and does not differentiate by reference to vulnerability. Secondly, income thresholds for adults without vulnerabilities are increased from 9,300 net to 14,000 gross. This will be comparable to other Welsh authorities operating the scheme and should avoid disadvantaging Powys residents. And thirdly, remove vulnerability requirement for occupiers of properties with an E-rated energy performance certificate. There are no additional resource implications for the authority. EcoFlex is fully funded by the participating energy companies, and Warm Wales will continue to deliver the scheme at zero cost to the council. Therefore, the recommendation of this report is that they adopt the revised statement of intent for the delivery of Eco3 LA Flex by Warm Wales. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nina. Andy, at this stage, is there anything you want to add to what the head of service has set out, or are you happy for us to go to questions and comments from members?
More than happy for you to go to questions, Chair.
Fantastic, thank you. We'll go to Councillor Kelvin Curry then, please.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks very much, Nina. It's great news, I suppose. We've got to look on the positives of this, and we are now going to be offering a service that will hopefully be available to a lot more people than the previous version. My concern is whether we've learned some lessons. Obviously, we're now comparing our criteria with those of other counties in Wales that have actually had a much bigger take-up than we have. You know, two installations is pretty poor by anybody's standards, and obviously the criteria were far too tight. And other councils managed to set a criteria that was accessible to a lot more people. And my concern is, you know, in retrospect, we're comparing ourselves with other Welsh authorities, and hopefully there'll be a lot more uptake. But when similar initiatives like this take place, are there measures in place to make sure that actually we do have a dialogue with other Welsh counties to make sure that we do have, you know, some parity across authorities as to what the criteria are? Because, you know, I don't know whether there is a mechanism to make sure that this happens, because, you know, People have missed out financially. You know, they've been paying higher energy costs. Environmentally, we've all been missing out because there's been more, you know, emissions going into the atmosphere. And we just need to have more efficient homes for people's health. So I'm just, you know, very grateful that this is happening now, but just want to be reassured that if similar initiatives come up, that there is some mechanism that we as a county can negotiate with other counties to make sure that we've got some kind of parity across the principality. That would be useful to hear.
Thank you, Councillor Curry. Yeah, you raised some very important points, and as you said, this scheme is really important for our residents of Powys, and it's a positive news story. I know that officers involved with the scheme have set up a working group with other local authorities to discuss this. I don't know how regular they are meeting. Sorry, I don't have that level of detail here with me today, but you're right, it's important that we do keep up that conversation with other local authorities around Wales, and we will take that as a way, as a continuing action from this meeting today. Yeah, that's absolutely important. And I'd just like to remind, you know, as it says in the report, it is the UK guidance has changed since we came out with our scheme. So we are looking now to adapt and to change our eligibility criteria to fit in with that new updated guidance.
Yeah, thank you. And Chair, if I just may, I suppose the most worrying thing of all is the fact that actually it didn't cost us, and it won't cost us as, you know, residents of Powys a penny. It doesn't come out of the council tax, so we don't have to fund this. So why the criteria were set so tightly in the first place, when actually we could have been quite generous to our residents, you know, is another concern. Anyhow, I will leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelvin. Gareth Jones, you're next on the list.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Nina, for the report. Just very similar line of question to what Councillor Kelvin just said. You mentioned that it's first come, first serve for all councils, all counties throughout Wales, and we're slightly behind the line. With it being only 12 months to go of the scheme, can I have an assurance that there is still enough money in the pot for Powys residents, and that other counties haven't taken it all up and beaten us to it, as it were? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. As far as I'm aware, yes, there is still money in the pot. Andy, I don't know if you've got any additional information or more detail on that, but yes, we're very keen to get this changed as soon as possible so that we can get as many Powys residents to benefit from the scheme as soon as possible, and there is money available. Andy, do you have any more? I'm not sure of any figures though, sorry, I don't have figures unless Andy has more detail.
I don't have any figures, but I will try and find out. But as I understand it, the pot is at the moment relatively full.
Good. And if thank you, that's reassuring. One more point, Chair. Can I just? There are a number of councillors potentially scrutinising this who may have a couple of houses that they rent out or whatever. And then is this gonna, should we declare an interest in that, or have we got dispensation, or is there a format in place? I just was wondering that, please.
Sorry, Councillor Jones, I don't know if it's my signal. I broke up a bit there, but I think you were asking who's eligible. So obviously it's eligible to everybody within Powys.
No, sorry,
sorry.
Nina, I was sorry. I was asking that, do we as councillors scrutinising this through the chair have to declare an interest if we've got houses that we rent out that may now, with the threshold altering up to 34,000 income, have to declare an interest because it may affect properties that we own, or is that irrelevant?
When would that be for a question for you to answer?
Well, for me, I think the first question is the person making the inquiry about whether they can actually have a sort of apply for the scheme anyway, is that the person owning the property or the person who currently is in the property, or both? And then if the answer is both, then if a member is actually thinking of going ahead to do this, I think it's probably reasonable that they would disclose an interest as a preemptive strike, just in case. Although we are not, you are not the decision makers here, it's the cabinet who actually take the decision. But having said that, if you've got a vested interest in this, I think you need to disclose an interest.
It's a matter for you as an individual member, Gareth. The advice is quite clear that if you believe that you've potentially got an interest, it is in your interest to declare.
Okay, in that case, then, Chair, thank you. I would like to declare an interest that this could potentially affect a couple of properties and tenants moving forward, if that's make things more transparent in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, cheers for that. Thanks, Gareth. If it's okay, we'll move on then. We'll go to Councillor Jackie Charlton.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, it always takes a little while to click the buttons, doesn't it? I too would like to echo what Kelvin said. This is really welcome and I'm really pleased. I suspect this has come really as advice from Warm Wales. And one of the questions I wanted to ask is, does Warm Wales also support those other authorities that you've got on your list there, who have obviously taken guidance to improve their statement of intent? So they do work. So sorry, I'm getting some feedback here. Kelvin said this is really welcome and I'm really pleased.
Jackie, I'm not sure what's happening.
Really, there's advice from Warm Wales, and one of the questions I wanted to ask is, does Warm Wales also support those other authorities that you've got on your list there, who have obviously taken guidance to improve their statement of intent? So they do work. So I'm getting some feedback here. Kelvin said this is really welcome and I'm really pleased.
Okay, I'm not sure what's going on here, but there's obviously what's being said and then a delay in the feed with it replaying. Wyn, is there a technical issue that you're aware of? And
not that I'm aware of. I was just checking now to see, was there something to come off the, unless somebody's watching it on the website as well simultaneously, but there shouldn't be within the meeting itself. That's the only thing I can think of, is somebody's got a web version open somewhere.
Okay.
I was just checking mine in case it was me, but I've got it muted this end. So.
No problem. So that's probably good advice. So all those members who aren't speaking, if you can keep yourselves muted until it's your go, that would be really helpful. Apologies, Jackie. Do you want to just recap on those points?
Yeah. Am I coming through okay now? Fine. Yeah, it was really weird. I was listening to myself coming back. Yeah, if I just go back, like Kelvin, I really welcome this. And my question, I don't know whether you heard the question, was that I'm rather assuming that Warm Wales also work alongside the other local authorities that you've got on the list. I won't go through the list. So I'm assuming that they've brought this information to Powys alongside the government recommendations for increasing this. One of the things that I wanted to ask, if you're a vulnerable individual, so if you're living in a property and you're a vulnerable individual, your income goes up to 34,000 where you can be considered for support. The other figures that you've put down in the report refer to a net figure of 9,300 being increased to a gross figure of 14,000. Now, my concern is, if you are on universal credit, but you're not vulnerable, are you able to, I mean, I'm not sure, you know, where the levels are. I tried to look at this. I tried to find out the information. I looked on all the websites for universal credit. It's really difficult to find out where that figure lies. So if you're in receipt of universal credit, but you're still working, does that take you up to that 14,000 or just above? And will you lose out because you are obviously in a lower income bracket there? And it would appear to me that if we're looking at this on the basis of fuel poverty, which is not on the basis of really reducing carbon emissions, because this is about fuel poverty rather than reducing carbon emissions, if you look at the statement of intent. I wonder, you know, how much we're going to get people coming forward for this, because It's really complicated. If you look at these things, it's not an easy thing to do. And I think people might be put off. And there was nothing in that statement of intent to give me any confidence that we are going to be reaching out to these people that really need this support and assistance. So I wondered whether you could give me some feedback on that. If you could tell me what Warm Wales are doing to make sure that they are reaching out, because that's what their job is, and where you can see somewhere in the statement of intent which really demonstrates that that's what we're doing as an authority, which is reaching out to these people. Because if we've only had 2 installations since last September, I mean, as you've already said, and I'm sure Warm Wales are in really, really disappointed in this. We're all really disappointed in what's happening here. So if I could have answers to those 2 questions, I'd be really grateful. And if we could also make sure that the Cabinet understands why we're asking these questions, in that we want to make this better than it is at the moment, because I think it's good, but I think it could be a lot better than it is. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Councillor Charlton. Some really, really important and key questions, so thank you. In terms of if Warm Wales are working with other local authorities around Wales, I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that. I know that they've certainly, it's been discussed with the other local authorities, but I don't know if it was taken up. But I will try and find out, and if I can't provide the answer now during this meeting, then I will obviously follow that up in writing straight after the meeting. So I apologise, I don't know that. In terms of the fuel poverty, and you were talking about obviously the low take up and the publicity, you're absolutely right that making sure that we're encouraging people to apply and they know about it is really important. Once the scheme launched, we as a council did some work to publicise it through our normal channels, and you know, through councillors as well, through social media and through press releases, etc. And Warm Wales as well have done work to be promoting that. But I take that on board. You're right. Perhaps we need to look at what else we can do, and so we'll take that as a way as an action to look at and to bring forward to Cabinet as well. What else we can do to encourage take up of this scheme, because you're right, this is really important that we get as many people who need this to access this funding in terms of the fuel poverty support and income support. I think you asked a question as well about the levels of universal credit and the 9,300 and 14,000 pound gross. There is a bit more detail under note 5 on that. But Andy, are you able to provide any more detail around those income threshold levels, please?
Thank you. Yeah, it's more around the income has and slightly less around the source, because obviously universal credit is designed for people who are working and adds up into their gross income. So that's really why sorry, can you hear me?
You're well, intermittently, I'm afraid. I don't know if others are having the same problem.
Okay. I've just had a thing flash on my screen saying my internet connection is a little jittery. It's quite weak down here in the depths of Ceredigion, I'm afraid. So the situation is that the income is very much around the gross income, and income will include different sources. And as universal credit is designed to work with, if you like, a top up for other incomes, people who are working or other benefits that they may have, the focus is on the income that you have coming into your household. The statement of intent sets out the eligibility around the size of the household as well. So a slightly larger household has a slightly higher income, because obviously they're going to need more money. So that's pretty much how it works, I think. And the incomes are linked, I think, to what people need to live on, and there is some relationship there with universal credit levels of income for different types of household. Does that answer the question? Sorry.
Well, yes, it does answer my question. Thank you. If I can just come back, is that okay, Matthew?
Yeah, the floor's yours.
It definitely answers my question, because it raises the concern that I have that 14,000 is a really low level of income, and I wonder whether we've got any, you know, can we be flexible with this? Are we able to increase that figure if we feel it's necessary, because I think, you know, living in rural Wales or living in rural Powys, there are other stretches of your income that perhaps you don't have in an urban area. I mean, I'm thinking of, you know, ways to travel to work, etc., etc. So I, you know, if I was living on 14,000 a year and I've got 2 small children and I was trying to pay my heating bills and my travel bills and all the things to do with the kids, that is really, really low, and I'm a bit concerned that we could increase that level, because we may have to start looking at increasing that level next year or the year after. Why don't we put something which is genuinely what we think is a figure that we think people should be eligible for? I just think 14,000 gross is a really, really small salary coming in, and if anybody's earning 14,000 working full time, you know, we're a very sad society.
Thank you, Councillor Charlton. I think it's that's per adult, that figure. So if you are a 2-person household, it would be higher than that. I think that's set out in the guidance. But yeah, I take on board.
My concern is single person households, single parents with children. That's where my real concern is, and then that becomes a gender issue as well, and that I'm really concerned about that. Yes, if you're a 2-person household, fine. But if you're a single person household with 2 small children.
I hear you, Jackie. We all agree, but you do need to let the officers answer too.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Charlton. And I think what we've put forward today, or at the moment, is what is being put. It's the UK. We follow in the UKB's guidance, etc., and what our local authorities are doing. But I take it on board that it is that very low, and so we'll take that away today, and we'll see if there's anything else we can do to see if we can increase that. Okay, thank you.
I think that's progress on that point, Jackie, and we'll log that as an action from today's discussion so that we can revisit it too. Okay, did you want to respond to anything else, Jackie, or can I move on?
Just to see whether, I think it's another action point for the Cabinet, if I may be so bold, to say we do need to find out what other authorities Warm Wales is working with. I would have thought that was fairly fundamental for us with our contract with Warm Wales, to find out exactly what they're doing elsewhere in Wales, so we can learn lessons and benchmark, because it's really important to know how somewhere like Rhondda and Taff are doing, if they're really increasing their numbers because they've taken on board what Warm Wales have said. And I think that's really positive, and we should know about that.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, Jackie. In fact, I seem to recall that was in the original paperwork when we scrutinised this, that we would be looking to Warm Wales for a national scheme. So yes, absolutely. Thanks for that. Phil Pritchard, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning. Yeah, I listened with interest. I think it's an excellent achievement or opportunity for us, if you like, to move forward. But there's one aspect of all this that, quite honestly, I've asked the question before and nobody ever seems to want to talk about it. And funny enough, in talking to 2 of my constituents, one I hit the button on the right on the top of the button, and floored me because I hadn't got an answer. They talk about this scheme for volcanic panels on the rooftops and the significant savings for people in houses as a result of having those. Now, this particular constituent told me why we don't do anything about it. In that he said, well, there's no saving for the council in that. That's why probably nothing's done. And I was lost. You know, for me to be lost and not able to say something is a little bit rough. But having said that, I'm asking the question, what opportunities have we got for that sort of scheme to be involved in all these? Because it makes a significant difference to people, particularly the older generation. And when I think of all the sheltered housing we have in Powys, and I've got a number of sheltered housing estates in my patch here, I think there's an opportunity there to help a hell of a lot of our tenants and significantly improve the standards of our housing stock. Is there anything can we tie that into this? Is it something for a separate scheme? Can we get something going? Because it makes a hell of a difference to the electric bills that these tenants are having to pay every year on year. Only a question to see what we can do. Thank you, Chair.
Bill. I think this scheme is specifically about private sector housing, but I leave that to officers to develop further. I personally agree with you. I think we've got a huge challenge in terms of retrofitting our own housing stock, but I think that's a point officers need to consider. So we'll go to Nina.
Thank you, Chair. You're absolutely right. This scheme isn't available for our housing stock, but we are doing a lot of work at the moment to see what we can do to make our existing housing stock more efficient in terms of energy efficiency, etc. Perhaps, Chair, if it's okay with you, I could hand over to Andy if you'd like just a run through of a couple of those kind of options and schemes that we've got ongoing at the moment.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm sure Phil will be keen to hear the response.
Chairman, can I just make one point for Nina? I note that there are a number of our sheltered housing schemes throughout Powys where of the last 5 years, we've put new roofs on bungalows. It's an excellent scheme. The roofs have been on since they were built. Yes, they want doing this, that, and the other. But surely it would be sensible if we were ever going to look at this sort of scheme, that we look at it on the basis of saying, well, hang on, we've had new roofs on all these. Let's follow it with a scheme that really updates it for these people. It's only a question, only a point, but I'd like somebody to at least bear it in their heads for the future. Okay.
Thanks, Phil. Cheers. Okay, Andy.
Oh, right. Okay, thank you. We are introducing in the municipal homes, the homes that we own, a number of measures to reduce fuel poverty, such as external wall insulation. Solar voltaic is very location dependent. So it really only works in certain places on certain roofs facing certain ways to make it work. It's also a cost factor as well. And as costs come down, I think we'd like to include more of it in our properties. But at the moment, it's a fairly limited scheme because of the cost and also the elevations of properties. It doesn't suit every property, I'm afraid. As solar voltaic becomes more efficient, the actual technology, and it is getting more efficient each year, then we'll be able to put it into more properties. So I would like to think that over the next few years, we will be introducing more of it. But it is at the moment, slowly, let's get it right. Let's put the equipment on that works in the right places so we get the best benefit from it. And that's really our approach for that. We have increased our energy efficiency of our homes, and we are getting a higher EPC, Energy Performance Certificate rating, as we go. But again, we are putting the right measures into the right properties. And again, it's a case of making sure that what we do is the right thing for the right property. Does that answer the question, Councillor Pritchard?
Yeah, I'm quite happy with that. I just wanted to put it on the table and be sure that it's an ongoing opportunity, if you like. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
No, Phil, thank you for raising it. An important point. I had Carl Lewis next on my screen. Carl has disappeared. I'm not sure if that's because his question was answered.
Yes, Chair. My question was answered by Councillor Jackie Charlton. Thank you very much.
Okay, cheers, Carl. Jeremy Pugh, then, please.
Thank you for that, Chair. Regarding the advertising, there's two things I'd like to pick up on some of that Les has said as well. I've not been aware, I've not seen any advertising to do with this at all in my area. So what I would say is when we put the package together to go out to advertise at the new criteria, do you think that then we should also advertise what is available, i.e. for warm houses, insulation, if it's available, or any other grants of any type, so that then we're informing our public that they have a wide understanding totally of what is out there, not just the one package, not just lose that chance. So that was my first thing. Secondly, the criteria, I think it'd be very useful for us as a scrutiny committee to actually go through the criteria forms to understand, because I don't believe it's quite as simple as just having a tick box that under a certain amount you go through this. And I just think that we've sort of got a half a picture rather than the whole picture, if that makes sense to you. And the other one is, EPCs, energy performance certificates, in my opinion, an absolute waste of time. You get a guy that comes around there, been on a course, guesses what he thinks, doesn't have a clue what he knows, and he marks out 90% of the properties to the lowest level because he has no understanding of being able to see what is inside the wall when the properties are built. So the whole criteria of EPCs, in my opinion, are nothing more than a joke. It's just a rip-off for people, and it doesn't deliver to what we really need to know and understand. Now, my real main concern is the effect on local plumbers and our local community, because I still haven't ever received any understanding of how we're going to engage with our local plumbers, because they are going to, if this is taken up on a wide scale, this is going to disadvantage our local plumbers if they are not the ones that fit this boiler. And then we talk about the Powys pound, which is every pound of profit in Powys is worth £1.20 with social inclusion. Where is the evidence to support that Warm Wales have actually gone out and engaged with our local plumbers? Because I can see nothing when I've looked through the document here, and the effects on our local plumbers could be devastating. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. There's a lot in there. I'm not sure who wants to respond to specific elements of that, and Jeremy can recap, I'm sure, if needed to. Should we start with the Powys pound element, and maybe Nigel, you'd like to comment on that?
Yeah, I'm pretty given, Chair. I think the issue for us in front of us at the moment is eligibility criteria for Eco 3. More than happy to deal with, Powys pound and supply chain issues separately, and maybe a separate piece of work, possibly even a scrutiny working group. I just picking up on Councillor Jeremy's point about going through the forms and stuff. I think that that's a good suggestion. I'm happy to look at that, because the more we understand about the processes, the easier it is for us to, and perhaps particularly for members, to advocate and sell the process. Within the communities. There is a lot of good information on our website. In fact, there's almost so much information on our website. Sometimes it becomes quite difficult to find stuff. You got to know what you're looking for. But there is some good, and I'll drop a couple of links in the chat now, Chair. But I would perhaps refer members more generally to a website in the first instance. But in relation to Powys pound issues, I perhaps repeated what I was saying earlier about where we are with this paper. This is Eco 3, not Eco 2, and this is the eligibility criteria. Happy to bring the whole supply chain issue back at a separate day, Chair.
Can I just pick up on a point on that? Appreciating you wanting to stick on this eligibility criteria element, but the impact assessment that was produced for this scheme, which we considered in February last year, did indicate that the scheme should make £340,000 for the council. Now, clearly that's important. It's part of the scheme that was positioned. So is the scheme still going to make £340,000 for the council, given its current poor performance in terms of schemes delivered for residents? And if not, why not? And what will the impact be on the council more broadly?
In simple terms, Chair, very, very fair point. Perhaps Andy and Nina can help me out with some of the numbers in original projection, but clearly we're below where we thought we were going to be. So hence, as you've heard from others, hence bringing forward the eligibility criteria today. Hopefully we can get back on track, get more people going through. What we want to see is more installations, isn't it? We want to see more activity and more people taking out of fuel poverty. So clearly any projections looked at previously have been a bit undermined by the low take up to date. There are extenuating circumstances of the last 12 months for all sorts of reasons that I'm sure everyone appreciates. But if we can get the criteria right, push out the scheme. I think it's already been picked up by others about comms. That's an important area as well. We can ramp up that and hopefully get a greater take up and hopefully get back to original projections. I'm hoping Andy's put his camera on so you can help me out with where we are in relation to the original project. I can't recall, Andy, what time period that was. The initial income projection.
I'm afraid, Nigel, I wasn't intimately involved in the original scheme, so I can't really comment upon income projections there. I think the income is more income to the county in terms of energy efficiency and giving people more money to spend in the wider communities. But I would need to get back to members, I think, of the committee and look at how those calculations were made and how they may or may not be changed by the changes that we're talking about today, if that's all right, Chair.
Can we take away your actions? I think it's a really important point. I'd like to see that as well. So if Wynne can record that as an action for us to come back on, that's okay, Chair. Sorry.
Can I come back, Matthew, please?
Yeah.
I haven't had an answer to anything.
The floor is yours, Jeremy. You go for it.
Right. Regarding the criteria, what I would like to do is if we could have something emailed out to all councillors so that we can then put it out in our areas, but not just about Eco3, about what other grants and things are available for home improvements, so that we got, or if there aren't anything, just simply say that so people understand, because there's a complete lack of transparency and understanding of what is and isn't available. So if we all had that, we could share it with our local town councils, and I believe we can get it out into the area that matters, and hopefully that will get a better take-up. The other one I wanted to never an answer to, and it was misunderstood under the Powys Pound. I need a guarantee here today of what Warm Wales are doing to engage with the local plumbers. It is a massive detriment to our local plumbers if they are not engaged to do this and to carry on afterwards doing the servicing to these boilers. Now, if we're going to bring in teams from outside of the county, there is no benefit to the Powys Pound because there's no profit within it. And that's a huge piece of work that I can see nothing with. And I'd like someone to answer that one, because that is the main point of the lot.
Chair, would it be okay if I came in to answer some of those points, please?
Yes, you're very welcome.
Firstly, in terms, Councillor Pugh, in terms of publicising this scheme, but also what other schemes and packages are available for our Powys residents, I think that's a really, really good idea, and that's an action that we'll take away. So when this, in due course, goes to Cabinet for decision, we'll include thereafter a big, out to all of you councillors, a list of what schemes are available to residents and how to access them, and a kind of a brief information on all the different schemes. So we'll include that and include that in a publicity kind of press releases, social media, etc. Use our existing channels to publicise all of the different schemes that are available. So yeah, I think that's a really good point, and happy to take that on board as an action moving forward. I note your comments on the EPCs. I can't really comment any further on that at this stage. In terms of the local plumbers, this isn't a boiler scheme. Eco3 isn't a boiler scheme, so you're not going to see, like previous schemes, the boilers being installed. So I think that's important to note, and that I think whoever does the installations is chosen by the tenant. So the tenant chooses who's. So it's not for the Council of Warm Wales to be recommending. It's for. Sorry, I'm just getting messages appearing and they just blocked my screen. So just to reiterate that this is a set boiler scheme in a way of previous schemes.
What actually is Eco3 then? Because I've gone through the document that we were given and it doesn't explain to me. I naturally assumed it was another boiler scheme. So what actually is Eco3 then? So we can understand it better.
It is looking at, there is more details being provided previously when the scheme came to scrutiny, but it's about reducing other energy efficiency schemes within homes. So new central heating system, heating upgrades, insulation, that type of things.
So it is central heating, but it's insulation as well to the property.
Insulation,
Does it include windows, if improvement to windows, loft insulation, wall insulation, cavity insulation? So it encompasses all of them properties. Oh, that's great, because I got to be honest, when I went through the document, I didn't quite pick that up, that's all. Right, that's great. So the tenant, the most important point, so the person who's having the work done will the one who will choose the contractor.
As far as I understand it, and I'll just double check on that for you, and yeah.
If that's correct, could you just check on that for me, because this is an important factor. Thank you all.
Thanks, David Selby. I will come to you in a moment, but I just want to pick up on this issue about the powers pound and money, because I've gone back through the original impact assessment, and this is important because it's about the service having ownership and oversight of the whole scheme, and I'm not getting the assurance at the moment that there is that level. In 1920, we were told it would generate 20k plus for the council, 2021 40, the same for 21-22, and the same for 22-23. That wasn't additional money being spent in the local economy. That was income for the council because it was reported in the impact assessment as a plus for the council in terms of the savings. So it would be generated income for the council. It worries me slightly that we don't have an officer on this call who seems to have any handle on that, because this committee has got to look at the service delivery plus the financials. And I think you need to take that away. I don't know from you, in response to that question, what the revised position for that would be. I would expect you to know that. If you're bringing a revised eligibility criteria to this committee, you should have revised the whole scheme, perhaps, and looked at the impact assessment as well. You touch on the impact assessment in the report that you'll be taking to Cabinet, but it makes no suggestion that that will be updated in line with your revised proposals. And I would argue that, you know, as you're trying to rebuild back better from the pandemic, income and protecting income of the council is really important. And I think you've kind of missed something really important here. And I'd just like you to explain that. And maybe if you could consider, or have I missed the point? Have you done any work on reprofiling what that revised income to the council will be?
Chair, if I could just raise, if I could respond to that point. The scheme or the programme is not delivering as expected at the moment, hence why those targets are not on track at this stage, hence why another reason why the eligibility criteria are being suggested to be changed in order to bring the scheme back into what was anticipated. So change the eligibility criteria. The anticipation is it'll bring the scheme back in line with the targets that were set out when the scheme was first proposed and set up. Okay, so just to be clear, Nina, you're saying at the end of this scheme, at the end of the financial year 22-23, this scheme will have generated the £340,000 towards the council that it promised originally. We're looking to bring the scheme back into line with what was proposed or within the impact assessment at the time the scheme was set up. That's not a yes, it's not a no, and I kind of, you know, I'm not going to hold you to it because things change. But is it your view that we will get to that position? I can't guarantee at this stage, but we'll have to monitor this if and when we can make the changes to the eligibility criteria. We'll have to carefully review the scheme moving forward and see if that is going to happen. But it is very difficult for me to answer that here today. Okay, it is quite important, Nina. And while you revise the eligibility criteria, I think it looks like you failed to revise the financials and the income to the council as well. And only that it's been raised today by somebody looking back to the impact assessment, we perhaps even realised it was there. So I think it's disappointing from a scrutiny perspective that the service hasn't looked at this issue in the whole. And I would have expected a more complete picture to be reported to scrutiny today, but I think that's an action point that you need to take away, and I would welcome you updating scrutiny on the financial element outside of this meeting if you could.
Matthew, would you indulge me, because Sarah Williams has put a thing in the chat box saying that what it is, they can choose from the people.
Can you just pause there? I just want Nina to answer that point and commit that she will update scrutiny on the financials.
Sorry, apologies.
Yes, Chair, I'm happy to take that as well as an action.
Brill, thanks very much. I just wanted to close that off. Jeremy, yes, go on.
Sarah, but I do apologise to everyone, but what's been put in the chat box is that there's an approved list of plumbers and people that deliver this. Now, what are we doing to ensure that Powys, workmen or tradesmen are getting on that list to ensure that the profit is in Powys and we're supporting the people of Powys? That is where I've been trying to get to throughout. So how can we guarantee and get insurances, and who's going to go away and check that it actually is happening and we're not just having a list which is from everywhere but within Powys?
I think some of that was dealt with originally in February 2020 when it came to scrutiny, but I'm happy if officers just want to give us a recap on that. That might be helpful. Andy, Nina? So Sarah is saying in the chat box that
Matt, listen, I haven't spoken to the Warm Wales people for a long time, but when I did speak to them, it was a case that they had a list of contractors, and it depending what you wanted installed, you contacted those contractors, and they would come and they would give you a price on what you wanted. And if you wanted to be part of the scheme, you had to go with one of those. Whether that's changed, I would presume there's an officer available who can say if that's changed since I would have spoken to them, some years ago. But this is the issue, isn't it? Generally it's more expensive to have it done through the scheme. You can buy the equipment cheaper, but then you don't get the benefit. So it puts people off, and these income thresholds and like criteria. I understand that we're tackling fuel poverty, but fuel poverty can sometimes apply to the working people as well. It doesn't mean because you're working and you might be earning over 14,000, as Jackie said, that's a very low amount of money, that you can't afford the fuel. I don't know if anybody, people who are on solid fuel, is anything between 250 and 320 pounds a tonne, which is an extortionate amount of money for people, and people ideally like to change their systems, but they're just not able to. So we need to be looking at the carbon footprint as well in this scheme as the financial side of things, because as I said in the climate training that we had, that needs to be identified. We need to be looking at people with coal boilers and asking them if they need some support to get their systems changed, irrelevant of their income or capabilities to do so. So sorry, Jeremy. Yeah, that's how it was.
Sorry, Chair. I got stuck on mute earlier and I couldn't come in, but I've come off mute now. Perhaps, Chair, it'd be, obviously this is something that we discussed at the beginning of the scheme, the importance of this. Warm Wales do have a very key role in this, and the council does have a limited role. We know we're not the funder, we're not the decider here. But if the scrutiny would like, I could go back to Warm Wales and we could have an update on that specific issue on the scheme so far to date. I'm happy to take that away and bring that back.
Yeah, that would be really helpful, Nina. We'll pick that up as an action as well.
Can I ask Matthew one?
Can I just encourage members to put their hand up rather than chipping in, because I've got members who are waiting their turn to speak. And whilst this is really important and there's loads of good points coming out, I want to be fair to all colleagues if I can. David Selby, please.
Thank you, Chair. Coming back to what we're here to discuss, which is the criteria, the financial criteria. I'm sure nobody disagrees that they need to be improved, because the measure of this particular scheme is how many installations we made. So clearly the scheme at the moment has failed, and we've got to find ways around that. Two things I'd like to ask. There is no point changing the criteria unless we also improve the publicity, and other members have mentioned this as well. The publicity, we've got to be promoting the scheme, and particularly targeting the scheme at private landlords, for example, in certain areas, or areas like Sarah's identified where the particular heating requirements or the heating systems are not adequate for needs. So it has to go hand in hand with that. And I'm not sure we've had enough back from officers about the extra promotion that Warm Wales and ourselves are going to do. And then the final point I want to make is about a review. The danger with the system we've gone through with this is taking a long time to change the criteria. And I think we ought to urge Cabinet and with a paper here to build in an automatic review of the thresholds within, let's say, 3 months, so that we can move on quickly to promote it to more people. Because without installations being done, not only are we not meeting our own financial criteria, far more importantly, we're not tackling the whole purpose of the scheme in the first place.
Thank you, Councillor David. Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to commit here today that there will be a increased publicity from both Powys County Council and Warm Wales if these changes to the eligibility criteria are approved by Cabinet in due course. I'm happy to do that and say that we will put that, absolutely, definitely put that in place. And I note your comments about putting in a review period as well, and I think that's a really good idea, a really good point, and we'll add that into the report as well. I'll just have a little chat with officers about the timescale, but you suggest in 3 months, and we'll certainly look at that as a starting point for that discussion on the review. But thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks for that, David, and that's helpful, Nina. Thank you. I can't see any further hands up at this stage, but can I just clarify, in the paper that we've got from Warm Wales, where it details the numbers that were cancelled or rejected, do you know if the council will ask Warm Wales to revisit those should Cabinet amend the eligibility criteria to see if any of those would now become eligible?
I will double check with Warm Wales, but I would certainly suggest that's a very good idea that we do go back to those applications that have been rejected and relook at them in light of any change to criteria to see if they could be included in the scheme. So yes, I'll definitely think that would be a very good idea. Thank you.
That would be great. And if we could be updated on the numbers then from that particular pool, because that might help indicate to us actually how many were in need but not eligible. That would be great. Thank you. No other comments from colleagues at this stage. Oh, Kelvin Curry.
Yep, thanks very much, Chair. I'd just like to fully endorse what Jeremy proposed earlier on about the emailing of all grants to county councillors, and I'm grateful to Nina for acknowledging that's what will be done. Just two questions, one question, one suggestion. The question is, when will that be done? And the second is really, how often will that be updated? Would it be dated, because we get loads of emails all the time and the criteria change and grants come and go. So would it be appropriate, say, on the 1st of every month, we have an update of whatever grants are available, so that there can be a continuing cycle so that we can keep our constituents updated as well?
Thank you, Councillor Curry. I'll put commitment forward that we will get that information ready to roll for as soon as any decision is made by Cabinet. We will do the preparation work on the publicity beforehand, so that's ready to go. You're absolutely right, the sooner the better. I know that I recall an email going to councillors a few months ago about some schemes, and I don't think that much would change monthly, but perhaps quarterly, if we sent an update to councillors on schemes available, would that be okay, Councillor Curry? Because I don't want, as you said, I know you get a lot of emails, and I just don't think enough would change monthly, but quarterly, I think would be quite good timing, I think.
Yeah, that would be fine. Yeah. But hopefully we won't have to monitor that, but it'd be nice at a later date that we knew that they had gone out 4 times per year. That would be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, Jackie.
Just quickly to come back on what David was saying about a review, which I think is a really good idea, and I'm pleased that Nina's taken that on as well, is I'm assuming that in the contract that we have with Warm Wales, there are review periods anyway. Can you just confirm that for me, please?
You're on mute, Nina, still.
Sorry, apologies for that. I'm having a few issues. Thank you, Councillor Chanton. I'm afraid I don't have the contract with Warm Wales in front of me today, but I can certainly take that away and check on the review period with that as well. So I'll take that as an action. Thank you.
Thank you. It'd be really useful to have that information back as well, so that we know that that there is. I would have anticipated that there is a review in there. I'd be very disappointed if a contract was set up without a review, but I'm assuming that it'll be in there. And if you could just confirm that, that'd be great.
The head of services said she'll pick that up as an action, so it'll be reported back in the minutes of the meeting, Jackie. Okay, thank you, folks. That is the end of this session. Members will need to log out of this Zoom meeting and go into the Teams invite that's in your calendar for the briefing session. We will be receiving a briefing on a number of items on services within the committee's remit from officers. So we're slightly late for that, but I'll propose that we meet in there now at 11:10, just to give you time to grab a drink and have a short comfort break. So thank you all. See you on the other